After my mom moved in, she secretly put the house in her name, locked me out, and said it's my retirement plan. So I quietly filed the right papers and made her regret ever touching my mail, my door, or a damn pen. I'll never forget the sound of that click. The deadbolt sliding into place. The silence after. It was the sound of my own mother locking me out of the house I'd bought. The one I'd spent 3 years fixing up, paying every dime of the mortgage on, and planning to raise my future kids in. I remember standing on the porch that morning, still in my work clothes, holding my coffee, staring at the door like maybe it was a joke. I knocked. Nothing. Knocked again, harder this time. Then her voice came through the other side, cold and casual. "You don't live here anymore, honey. It's my house now." At first, I laughed, because that's what you do when something's so absurd you can't even process it. I said, "Mom, seriously, open the door." But then she said it. "You shouldn't have left important documents in the mail pile. I told you I'd take care of things for you. Guess I did." My blood went cold. Because I had left the closing paperwork on the counter last month when I refinanced. And she had been helping with the mail ever since she moved in, claiming she wanted to feel useful. I didn't understand how she could have done it, how she could have even put the house in her name. But she had that tone. The smug, careful tone she used when she thought she'd outsmarted me. I pounded on the door until my knuckles bled. She didn't open it, just said through the door, calm as a cat, "It's my retirement plan now. You'll thank me when I'm gone." And then I heard the TV turn on. That's when I realized it wasn't a mistake. She'd planned this, every bit of it. That night, I sat in my car outside my house and thought about every little thing she'd done in the months leading up to this. The helping with the bills, the organizing of the file cabinet, the sudden interest in my mortgage paperwork. And I remembered something else. When I was 12, she'd done the same kind of thing to her own sister, got her name added to their mother's will, and walked away with the house. I'd overheard the fights back then. And now, it was me. But if she thought I was just going to walk away, if she thought she could take everything I'd built and call it her retirement plan, she had no idea who she'd raised. Because that night, I made a promise to myself. I was going to get my house back, and I was going to make her regret every forged signature, every stolen envelope, every word that came out of her lying mouth. She thought she'd played the system. She didn't know I was already part of it, because of my job, and that was her first mistake. Before everything went to hell, my mom and I actually got along, or at least I thought we did. She'd had a rough few years. My dad died when I was 25, and she never recovered financially or emotionally. She bounced between apartments, part-time jobs, and a couple of short-term relationships that didn't end well. I was her good kid, the one who made it out, the one with the house and the steady government job. That's why, when her landlord sold the place she was renting, I told her she could move in with me for a few months. It wasn't charity. It was just the right thing to do. I even cleared out the guest room, set her up with her own bathroom, and added her to my utilities so she could feel at home. At first, it was fine. She cooked dinner, helped clean, and even took care of my dog when I worked late. I'd come home to candles lit, dinner on the table, and her smiling like she'd found peace again. But things shifted fast. She started treating the place like it was hers, rearranging furniture, donating my stuff without asking, repainting my kitchen cabinets because she couldn't stand the color. When I said something, she'd laugh it off. "Oh, honey, I'm just helping. You should thank me, this place was a mess." Then came the mail. I didn't think much of it when she said she'd grab it for me. I worked full-time and was studying for a certification, so it felt like one less thing to worry about. But I started noticing little things, envelopes missing, bills I never saw until they were past due. When I asked, she'd say, "Oh, I must have put it somewhere safe," and then suddenly find it a few days later. What I didn't know was that she wasn't just reading my mail, she was signing it. And I'd practically handed her the keys to do it. Because as a notary clerk at the county courthouse, I was used to dealing with property paperwork. When I refinanced, the bank mailed a few forms for my signature. I left them on the kitchen counter, assuming I'd handle them later that night. But she was always home before me, and she'd watched me sign documents before. She knew my handwriting, my initials, my routines. I didn't realize then how dangerous that was. I just thought, she's my mom. What's the worst she can do? Then one day, I overheard her on the phone with someone, whispering about transferring ownership and filing it at the recorder's office. When I walked in, she hung up fast and told me she was on the phone with an old friend. I remember feeling uneasy, but I let it go. Because who suspects their own mother of plotting to steal their home? If I'd paid more attention then, maybe I could have stopped it before she pulled it off. But I didn't. I was busy. I was tired, and I trusted her. And that trust was exactly what she used to destroy me. What she didn't know, though, what she never could have planned for, was that I had access to things she didn't. Files, systems, names of people who owed me favors. And when she locked me out that morning, I stopped being her daughter. I became her worst possible problem. After that lockout, the first thing I did wasn't scream or cry, it was think. I parked 2 blocks away, sat in my car, and pulled up the county recorder's database on my laptop. My login still worked. And sure enough, right there under property ownership transfer, I saw it. Owner. My mom's full name, transfer date. 2 weeks ago my stomach dropped. She'd already filed it. Official, recorded, notarized. Except the notary wasn't anyone I knew. And that was weird because I knew almost every notary in the building. So I looked up the ID number. Turns out it was a real person, a woman named Candace M. out of a nearby town. I knew that name. She used to rent from my mom. So yeah, my mom had found someone outside my county to stamp the signature. I'd bet my life that Candace didn't even check the ID before she signed off. At that point, it hit me how long my mom must have been planning this. She'd probably forged my signature, notarized it through her friend, and filed it quietly, assuming no one would ever question it. And since she lived in the house, there was no one to challenge the paperwork when the transfer posted. She had literally stolen my home on paper. I drove back just before dark and found all my things sitting in garbage bags on the curb, my clothes, my tools, even my dog's bed. She'd changed the locks, unplugged the security cameras, and left a sticky note on one of the boxes. You should have been more careful with your mail. Love you, Mom. I swear my hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold my phone. I called her, straight to voicemail, texted her, nothing. Then I texted her neighbor, Mrs. Green, the retired lady next door who always gossiped. Within 10 minutes, she called me and said, "Sweetheart, your mama said she's selling the place soon. Said it's too big for her." Selling, she wasn't even going to live there. She was going to flip my house. I went from shock to pure fury, but I couldn't just march in and break down the door. She'd already called the police on me once that week for trespassing. They told me to handle it in court. So I started digging. Quietly, first I pulled every document tied to the property from the database. I scanned the deed transfer page and saw the signature, mine. It was close, but not close enough. A little too round on the M, the kind of forgery you'd only spot if you knew your own handwriting. Then I checked the notary seal. Something was off, the stamp looked too perfect, too crisp. I'd seen hundreds of those, and no real stamp ever came out that clean. And then I noticed something that made me sit back and grin. The notary ID was expired. Expired by almost a year. Which meant the whole transaction, every single piece of paper she'd filed, was legally voidable. But I didn't rush to confront her. No, I wanted to let her get comfortable. I wanted her to think she'd won. So I let a few weeks pass while I quietly lined up everything I needed. I called a real notary investigator, talked to a friend in the county clerk's office who handled title fraud, built a neat little case file, every fake signature and stamp lined up perfectly. And while she was bragging to her bingo friends about finally owning a house, I was already setting up the trap that would rip it out from under her. Because I wasn't just coming for my home, I was coming for her record, her reputation, her money, and she didn't even see it coming. I thought the one person I could never imagine turning on me was the one who taught me how to do this job. Tom had been my mentor at the county recorder's office for 6 years. He showed me how to spot a fake seal, how to read a sloppy escutcheon, how to politely call someone out when a signature didn't match. He was the reason I'd gotten promoted, the reason I could pull audit logs in the middle of the night and sleep with a clear conscience. He was the guy I'd trusted more than anyone outside the family. So when I found the email, my hands went numb. I was combing through every digital trail I could find, timestamps, upload logs, IP addresses, anything to prove the transfer was fraudulent. The deed had been uploaded from a public terminal, but the submission record showed the user who uploaded it as T. Riverton, Tom Riverton's login. At first I thought it was a fluke. Maybe someone had used his station, Maybe it was a mistake. Then I pulled the security camera footage from the public terminal room. It was grainy. It was midday. And there it was. Tom, leaning close, handing a manila envelope into my mom's trembling hands while she mouthed the words I'd heard 1,000 times as a kid. "You'll be fine, honey." Tom's face didn't look nervous. It looked practiced, familiar. I sat in my car and watched the footage again and again until the world went quiet. The manila envelope was my packet, the refinancing forms I'd left on the counter. The same ones she'd found. The ones that would let her forge my signature and have it notarized if someone turned a blind eye. I called Tom. He picked up on the first ring and laughed like nothing was wrong. "You've been busy, huh?" he said, like we were joking about an Excel sheet. I asked him flat why his login showed as the uploader. He stammered, then said he'd been covering a shift. He said he'd helped a woman drop off a packet. He said it in such a casual way that my skin crawled, but I didn't have to rely on his word. I had the footage. I had the upload logs. I had a scanned copy of the deed with the notary stamp clear as day. And then, because Tom was sloppy in ways he'd never been around me, I found the clincher. An email thread between Tom and someone saved in a folder he called personal. The subject line read, "Done, she won't know until she gets home." The attachment was my deed. Tom's reply was just 2 words, "Enjoy it." When I confronted him in a quiet corner of the courthouse, he tried to smile like we were still on the same team. He said he'd helped out an old friend. He tried to guilt me. "Your mom's been through a lot." But the video and the email were unshakable. He had chosen my mother over me, the woman who raised me, the one who'd taught me to read a title and trust my eyes. He'd taken the easy paycheck and the promise of something from her, maybe money, maybe flattery, maybe revenge I didn't yet understand. That's the part that hit me deeper than the theft. She had not acted alone. She'd built a little coalition. A notary with an expired commission, Candace. A gullible neighbor, the one who helped unload my things. A trusted mentor who could make the paperwork look legit inside the system. It wasn't just domestic betrayal anymore. It was conspiracy, threaded into the place I thought was safest. I left the courthouse with the email saved to 3 different drives and a new understanding of how dangerous this was. If people inside the system could be bought or bent, then the legal protections I trusted were only as strong as the humans running them. That night, I sat with the footage and the email and let the bile rise in my throat. My next move had to be surgical. Public confrontation would tip my hand. A quick lawsuit might get me temporary relief, but not justice. What I needed was leverage. Something that would make Tom and my mother regret ever thinking they could get away with it. And then, I found something else in Tom's files that I hadn't expected. Something that wasn't just a smoking gun against him. It was a key that could blow the whole thing wide open. I didn't roar. I didn't storm. Revenge like this isn't about theatrics. It's about paperwork, timing, and not giving your enemy a second to breathe. I spent that first week after the Tom discovery mapping the things I could do that were legal, undeniable, and painfully humiliating to anyone who'd helped my mom. Step 1 was containment. I called a lawyer, someone I barely knew but who answered on the second ring and didn't act surprised when I said the words forgery, notary fraud, and title theft. She told me the first move was simple and blunt. File a criminal complaint for forgery and a civil action to quiet title. The complaint would put a detective on the case. The quiet title suit would give me the vehicle to ask the court to declare the deed null. Both together would buy me leverage. Step 2 was the weapons list. I compiled everything I already had. The county recorder upload logs, the grainy terminal room footage, Tom's done. She won't know until she gets home. Email, Candace's expired notary record, the uploaded deed with the anomalous stamp. I printed, cross-referenced, and color-coded each item. I created a timeline, when I left the packet on the counter, when the upload happened, when the transfer recorded. It looked like a murder investigation because, for me, it was. But you don't win by showing the obvious. You win by choking off every escape route. So step 3, stop the sale. The house could be gone in a week if she found a buyer. My lawyer filed an emergency lease pendens, a notice on the title that there's a lawsuit pending. It's ugly to some people, but it's the legal equivalent of slamming the brakes on a car at full speed. No one wants to buy a property with a cloud on the title. The buyer walks. Step 4, weaponize humiliation and the system. I reached out to a friend at the state's notary commission and asked them to audit Candace's files. I asked for an urgent review of Tom's recent approvals. I didn't hack anything. I opened formal complaints and let the bureaucracy do the digging. There is no faster way to make someone panic than officially making them a subject of a state investigation, and I knew it would get to Tom faster than any conversation. Step 5 was more personal. I hired a private investigator to talk to Candace and the neighbor who'd helped my mom dump my stuff. The Pie's job wasn't to menace them. It was to quietly ask questions that people hate answering when they're in the wrong. Who promised you money? Who made you feel like this was helping? Who told you it was okay to sign off on expired paperwork? People slip when they're asked for details, and slips became ammunition. The plan had risks. Going public too early might alert my mom and Tom to cover their tracks. Filing nothing would let them celebrate. So I built a sequence. Criminal complaint filed, lease pendants recorded, notary complaint lodged, quiet title suit filed, Pie interviews in progress. Each domino was placed to fall and block the next escape. There was one more thing I did that people would later call cruel. I called my mom's bank under the guise of a concerned relative and asked about recent wire activity. The teller's answer, a small, oddly timed transfer to a P.O. box in Tom's town, made my stomach drop and my fingers itch for action. It wasn't proof yet, but it put me on the scent of where the payoff might have flowed. I slept in fits for 2 nights. Planning like this is a kind of grief, cold and strategic, with anger threaded through every decision. But every time I felt that hot panic, I looked at the sticky note she'd left on the porch. "You should have been more careful with your mail. Love you, Mom." I pictured her reading that note in a stranger's kitchen, thinking she'd won. She hadn't won anything, not yet. Because I had started a legal chain reaction that wouldn't stop until the truth had punched a hole through every lie they'd built. It was supposed to be a straight shot. File the cases, watch the paper trail fold in on itself, and let the system undo the crime. But then something strange happened, something that changed the entire game. About 2 weeks after the filings, I got an unmarked envelope at my temporary apartment. No return address, just my name typed neatly in the center. Inside was a single USB drive and a note written in jagged handwriting that read, "You're not the first one she did this to. Watch before you go to court." I stared at it for a long time. My gut said it might be bait, maybe Tom or my mom trying to freak me out. But curiosity won. I plugged it into my laptop, isolated from Wi-Fi, and opened the only file on it. Hanson Property Video MP4. The footage started shaky, like it had been recorded secretly on a phone. It showed a man sitting at a kitchen table, holding a cup of coffee, talking to someone off-screen. His voice was tired but calm. "She said she just needed a cosigner," he said. "Said she'd take care of everything." Then the camera panned slightly and I froze. Sitting across from him was my mom, same calm face. Same tone she used when she lied, soft, steady, almost maternal. "I just want to feel secure in my old age," she told him. "You have no idea what it's like to start over at my age." The man, Hanson, I guessed, looked unsure but nodded. Then she slid a paper across the table. The camera zoomed in just enough for me to see the words warranty deed transfer. She'd done this before. My hands shook. The timestamps in the corner showed it was from 4 years ago, before she'd even moved in with me. And the address in the file name? It was a small ranch house on the other side of town that had gone up for sale around that time. I checked public records. Sure enough, there had been a property dispute. The Hanson family had sued an unnamed relative associate for fraudulent transfer. The defendant had settled quietly. The address listed on the case file matched one my mom had used as a mailing address for 2 years before she came to live with me. She'd done this exact scam before. And guess who the notary was back then? Candace. Same fake stamp, same handwriting, same process. This wasn't just a one-off betrayal or a desperate act of survival. This was her pattern. She'd been running this scam like a hobby, targeting people close enough to trust her but distant enough to silence. And that's when the rest of it started making sense. Tom hadn't just helped her for money. I dug back into his files and found an old case review with the Hanson property, signed by him, closed quietly with no follow-up. He'd covered for her before. This had been going on for years. The USB drive ended with one last video clip, someone off camera, whispering, "She ruined my dad." Then static. That line hit harder than anything else. Whoever sent this, they weren't warning me out of kindness. They wanted to see her burn too. I didn't know who they were, but I knew they'd given me exactly what I needed. Proof of intent. Pattern, history, premeditation. So I added the video to the evidence binder, labeled it Exhibit E. Prior conduct, and sent a quiet copy to the detective assigned to my forgery complaint. The next morning, he called me himself. "You're not going to believe this," he said. "We've got another report. A guy from another county just filed the same complaint about your mother. Looks like she sold him a house that wasn't hers. 2 victims, 2 counties, 1 signature." This wasn't just a family dispute anymore. It was a full-blown criminal investigation, and my mom was the common denominator. But what I didn't know, not yet, was why. Why she'd been doing it for years. Why she'd even roped in Tom. Why she'd risked prison to hurt her own kid. And when I finally found out the reason, it wasn't desperation. It was something far colder. The call that finally told me why she'd done it didn't come from the detective or my lawyer. It came from a number I didn't recognize, a 702 area code. Las Vegas. I almost didn't pick up, but something in me said to. A woman's voice came on, calm but wary. "Is this my name? I'm calling about your mother." My stomach nodded. "Who is this?" She hesitated. "My name's Carla. I used to live with her." I didn't understand. "Live with her like a roommate?" "No," she said quietly. "Like a business partner, kind of." Then she dropped the rest of it, and the floor fell out from under me. My mom had been running a long game. She wasn't just stealing houses randomly or out of panic about retirement. She'd been systematically targeting vulnerable people, single homeowners, mostly older, sometimes sick, and helping them refinance, file tax exemptions, or manage their property paperwork. Then she'd flip their houses or drain their home equity through fraudulent transfers, usually with Tom's help at the recorder's office to fast-track the filings and clean up the paper trail. Carla had been her inside partner for almost 3 years, the one who found the marks through senior groups and church directories. When Carla got scared and wanted out, my mom bought her silence with a small payout until the last deal, when my mom cut her off and threatened to ruin her with fake police reports for financial abuse. I didn't say anything for a long time. Then I asked, "Why tell me now?" She exhaled. "Because I saw your story on the county docket. I saw her name, and I realized she's not going to stop, not even with her own daughter." Carla sent me everything she had. Emails, voicemails, and the worst, a recording of my mom talking about me. I listened to it in my car in the courthouse parking lot. My mom's voice was so casual it made my chest hurt. "She's a good kid, but she's naive. She'll rebuild. She always does. And honestly, if I can get one more property out of this before I'm too old to sign my own name, then maybe it'll finally be worth raising her." Worth raising her. Those 3 words burned through every ounce of confusion I had left. This wasn't some misunderstanding or panic move. This was intentional cruelty. She didn't just want the money, she wanted the control. She wanted to prove she could take from me and get away with it. Carla told me something else, too. My mom had been quietly funneling money from the house sales into an offshore account. Tom's name was listed as a secondary contact. They'd built a safety net together, planning to disappear once they'd pulled one last retirement deal. That deal was my house. It wasn't just a betrayal, it was the finale of a con she'd been running for years. And I was supposed to be the perfect, gullible last mark. But the thing about people like my mom is that they never plan for resistance. They never imagine their victims will push back hard enough to hit back with precision. And by the time that recording ended, I'd made a silent promise. She was going to lose everything, not just her fake retirement plan, but every dollar she'd ever stolen. And Tom, he'd go down with her. They thought they were the ones writing the story. They didn't know I was about to end it. With court orders, audits, and public exposure sharp enough to carve both of their names into every fraud record in the state. I remember the first time I walked back into my living room after all of it was done. The sunlight looked the same, the couch cushions still sagged in the same way, but the air felt different. Clean. Like someone had finally opened a window after months of smoke. The legal pieces I'd set in motion did what I hoped, and then some. The detective's initial report plus the Hansen video and Carla's recordings were enough to prompt the district attorney to file criminal charges for forgery, notary fraud, and conspiracy. Tom was suspended within a week. Candace's commission was revoked after an emergency hearing. The state notary board didn't even wait for a full investigation to slap provisional sanctions on her. She'd used an expired stamp on multiple documents, and that's a quick way to self-destruct. The quiet title suit I filed in the Hamilton County Common Pleas Court. I'd picked Cincinnati because it's where the recorder's office is, and where my job had been did the heavy lifting on the civil side. The judge didn't like the upload logs, the expired notary seal, or Tom's done. She won't know until she gets home. Email either. Within 30 days, there was a temporary injunction that reversed the transfer, the deed was voided, the lease pendants stayed the sale, and the title went back to me while the criminal case played out. But I didn't stop there. I wanted the full accounting. I hired a forensic accountant to trace the money from the sales my mom had made. That trail led to a Shell LLC, a P.O. box in Nevada, hello, 702 caller, and a small offshore account. With subpoenas, the DA froze those funds and filed a civil asset forfeiture motion tied to fraud proceeds. The bank complied. Tom's bank accounts showed payments correlated to the house transfers. He got indicted along with my mother. Public exposure was the sting I'd been saving. I worked with the DA to arrange a press release and a small press conference. My mother's face went from smug to pale when Channel 5 ran the story about the homeowner fraud ring, complete with grainy footage of Tom at the public terminal and clips from the Hanson video. The church ladies at her bingo group stopped answering her calls. The small kindnesses she used as cover turned into a chorus of accusation in front of her own community. She had built her little empire on being liked. When liking evaporated, there was nothing left. The criminal case didn't end with a dramatic courtroom confession. There were plea negotiations. Tom took a deal for reduced time in exchange for cooperation. Candace, who insisted she'd only meant to help when they called her, lost her notary license and faced misdemeanor charges. My mother took the fight all the way to trial for months, but the evidence was a rope around her. She was convicted of multiple counts. The judge ordered restitution to the victims, asset forfeiture, and a sentence that put her behind bars long enough for the word retirement to lose any cozy meaning. Emotionally, the hardest part wasn't seeing her led away. It was sitting across from her in the visitation room and hearing the flat, small version of the apologies she offered, rehearsed, hollow. She looked at me like she expected me to still be the kid who would fold, who would rescue her with a hand on her shoulder and a "it's okay, Mom." But I was older than that now. I was braced. I had built a life she tried to steal, and I wasn't trading it back for her comfort. The house was mine again, legally and physically. I changed the locks, for good this time, and installed a mail slot and a small sealed mailbox right by the door, forever out of reach from anyone who thought helping meant taking. I filed for a civil judgment against both of them for the emotional damage and the cost of litigation. The recovery was partial, but it meant their fraud wouldn't pay for their legal fees. The DA's forfeiture returned enough to cover the victims' losses and left both my mother and Tom holding legal bills they couldn't pay. I don't pretend it didn't break me. I lost more than money. Trust, the simplest idea that your family will have your back. But I gained something else, a clarity I never asked for and never wanted. I sleep without the gnawing dread of who is rifling through my mail. I watch my dog curl up on the couch I fought for, and I'm allowed to imagine a future where someone else's greed isn't the punctuation mark. When people asked how I did it, I never said, revenge, like it was glamorous. I said flatly, paperwork, patience, and not letting her normalness be an excuse for the criminality she chose. The system is slow, but it's not blind if you know how to show it the light. The last time I saw her before she went away, she told me, "You've always been stubborn." I smiled and told her the truth. "I learned from you." Then I locked the door, and this time I left the spare key in a safe place, not in somebody's smile.